Trades on 80 now. This is Priyanka Uppal and along with me is Shreyansi today. What an interesting week, Shreyansi. Completely from a complete shakeout from in broader market to rebounds in major indices. Let's get you a wrap on the weekly movements, what all happened during this whole week. First of all, March looks to be like a month for the large caps, the way large caps performed this whole week gone by so far. FI's buying came back, so DIs and FIs both were buyers, let's not forget yesterday. Tide seems to be moving completely in large caps only, but then what a surprise move from broader market since yesterday. Truncated week, expiry day moves, both factored in together. Broader market did get shaken out, but then the way they rebounded. In fact, there was a very interesting note, Shreyansi, if you remember. Bernstein note came this week only where they were talking about small and mid caps in a bubble, but then 3 times broader market has rebounded from its 50-day moving average, and now it's moving at a very big support. Seems like the coming week we could see higher levels, what analysts are also expecting. We will have Soni later in the show where we will talk about the technical levels also. But the leadership completely looks like from PSU banks, metals and IT, which are set to be the global sectors also. And now let's talk about other few stories which came over. In fact, let's not forget that the coming week is going to be a crucial week because 40 midweek we will also see announcement of the election dates, which can be a big trigger for markets. But then exclusive from RBI Governor Shreyansi, where we see that FY24 GDP growth can be close to 8%. That was one of the big story for this week, as well as the strong GDP numbers and the Moody's estimates on India. What all do you have?
Absolutely. Now, you've just summed it up pretty much. But, you know, when you look at the moves that we've seen coming in from other asset classes as well, those have been some stellar moves, right? So when you look at Bitcoin as well, you've seen that Bitcoin hit a fresh all-time high. Spot gold as well had a glittering week after investors ramped up bets of rate cuts. And then, of course, there was safe haven buying that was playing in on account of the geopolitical turmoil that we've seen. But one sector that did not shine, on the other hand, there were some stocks that were marred by negative news flows, primarily from the NBFC sector, which dragged the entire space lower. So the likes of iifl Finance, JM Financial as well saw quite the cuts coming in on a weekly basis after the RBI ban, and that is the news that we saw play out in that particular space. But then shares of several Tata Group companies, including Tata Motors, Tata Chemicals, Rallis India, Tata Power, Nelco, as well as Tata Investment Corporation, surged up to 15%. And that was as the buzz around Tata Sons' expected IPO turned louder. So that is also something that we definitely saw playing in. And that's, I think, something that will be emerging as a trend going forward as well, because now that you're seeing leadership changing a little bit, especially in the NBFC space, that definitely begs for a question to be asked about it.
Absolutely, Shreyansi. And in fact, we've seen the comfort coming into banks just because there was a big crackdown on NBFCs. But we did see that iifl Finance did bounce back and a lot of other NBFCs which rebounded in today's trade. But then now let's have our experts in the show today. We have Soni Patnaik, who will give us a technical overview, and we will have also Ashish on talking on fundamentals also. Welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to both of you. Firstly, very quickly, a take on the technicals. Soni, what we make out is that broader markets was in question clearly this whole week. The sentiment was very weak in here, but the way they have rebounded, and of course, the outperformance in large cap cannot be questioned, but the broader market rebounded from 50-day moving average third time. Do this makes a case for more upside in the coming week?
Good afternoon, Priyanka. Thank you so much for having me in the show, and great to see you on ET Now as well. So I think, yes, definitely, maybe the broader markets, they've not performed as well as our domestic markets have. And, if you look at just the domestic data points, pointing out that Nifty and Bank Nifty both should be heading higher for higher levels in the coming week. The support for Nifty just keeps on rising. We saw last week 21,900 was very crucial support. It rose to 22,200, and now we can see 22,300, 22,400 itself is also acting as quite a strong support band. As long as this is getting defended in short term, I feel that Nifty definitely can test 22,800, and even above that 23,000 can be on cards. Most likely in the next 2 weeks or so, we can say that the levels can get tested. Talking about Bank Nifty is yet to test its new all-time highs, And any move above that, of course, it will open gates towards 49,500 plus levels for Bank Nifty. Bank Nifty also has a good lot, very strong support around 47,500 to 47,000. And any small dip that can be seen in Bank Nifty, it's just a good level to reinitiate the longs, hold the targets for 49,500 plus levels in the coming week.
Absolutely. Thanks, Soni, for that roundup coming in. I'll also toss it to Ashi Anand, CIO at IME Strategies, Valcreate Investment Managers. Ashi, my question to you would be, while we've seen the benchmark scaling all of those new highs, there were some stocks, like I mentioned earlier, that were marred by negative news flows. You've seen the entire NBFC space really bleed due to the rub-over impact of what we've seen happening for JM Financial and even for IIFL Finance as well. So what is the trajectory that right now you're penciling in for that particular space right now?
So, clearly, if there is going to be some kind of regulatory action, right? And you've seen regulatory action against Paytm, against JM, against an IIFL. Those stocks are going to be under pressure until such time as that those regulatory bans aren't lifted. What we are kind of seeing is that across a suite of companies, when companies, especially in the financial services sector, are growing very, very rapidly, they tend to sometimes be certain, there's a certain amount of laxity in terms of certain kind of regulatory guidelines. And the RBI is clearly coming down very strictly on these companies. According to us, until these bans aren't lifted, until you're not seeing some kind of clarity around how business is going to evolve, some of these stocks will actually continue to underperform until you will need to see clarity emerge.
All right, very interesting. In fact, let's talk about more. Let's talk about technically how strong global sectors also look like. Soni, the way I started the conversation, because the global sectors, IT and metal, the leadership clearly emerged from these two sectors for this whole space. And in fact, we did saw some brokerage notes also. But the way metals have performed, there has been one big trigger because there was two meetings and stimulus plans underway from China. That's what was buzzing, which kept the interest in these space also. But how do you see the move for metal and IT going forward from here?
If we talk about metals, there were a lot of data points indicating that metals will see a good move in the March series. There were very strong rollovers from the February to March series, mostly on the long side. Individual stocks taken into account, and we've seen good breakouts happening, such as in SAIL, Tata Steel, Hind Copper. There are a lot of stocks which have individually shown very strong breakouts at current levels, and a lot of more space momentum still left for these stocks to come back. If we talk about IT space, IT has gradually by and far underperformed in the last 2 odd weeks. Even in the last 1 month or so, it has not performed the way we have seen in the last quarter. So I think IT is it's sort of a bouncing back, because there was a lot of selling pressure, and it's just stopped. It's just bouncing back. We can see some part of the reversal or the bouncing back can be fizzling out right now. So IT is not exactly to be the sector to watch out for in the coming days if Nifty were to test all those highs. Of course, if the support comes to Nifty, from the IT space, it'll be one can definitely look forward to it. But I think if we look at thesis or Infosys, there's a lot of resistance is still there, and technically it's not even taken out those resistances. So I think one can just look, just wait and watch for these large cap IT space stocks to take out those respective resistances. Then only one can just be confirmed that IT is going to give those supportive hands to Nifty when going ahead.
So bit of a wait and watch when it comes to IT then, Soni, but let's also take a look at one other group of companies that was really shining in trade, right? So shares of several Tata Group companies, including the likes of Tata Motors, Tata Chemicals, Tata Power, or even a Nalco or Tata Investment Corporation also, they were surging in trade, right? And the buzz around the Tata Sons IPO is really turning louder. So then in the light of that, how are you looking at this entire pack of stocks, Ashi?
Have historically done fairly well for investors, and Tata Sons actually, if it does get listed, it will be one of the largest kind of IPOs. It'll be very, very interesting to see if that actually does come in. But I think what you have seen is across a bunch. If you take someone like a Tata Motors, they were really struggling quite significantly a few years back. JLR was under pressure. They were losing market share in PV, also in the CV part of the business. A lot of that has all turned around. The technology parts of the businesses have all been firing and doing reasonably well. There is some short-term pressure clearly in IT, but I think from a business perspective, the businesses are pretty well positioned. You also kind of seeing a turnaround in metals. So across the board, you are seeing kind of momentum. The consumer part of the business is doing extremely kind of well. So I think you are seeing a combination of business turnarounds at an industry level, as well as kind of company specific. These companies have turned around their operations and doing respectively well in their respective areas. So it is a space that can continue to do well. And Tata is obviously it's a group which has created value for investors over the longer term.
All right, stay with us, Ashi and Soni. We'll stay for a short break. Quickly coming back and more on the show. Please don't go anywhere.